What's poppin', everybody? This is Satyrbulfinder4, and welcome to part 1 of the 2021-2022 set of rotation videos that I'm going to make for the upcoming rotation. It's going to take place on September 10th. Before we get into the first set, which is going to be Team Up, the official Pokemon TCG website listed that they're going to be changing the way they do the rotations. In technical terms anyway, it's going to be as we expected, but instead of announcing the sets, it's going to be done through regulation marks. So regulation marks were introduced in the Sword and Shield era, and basically for our upcoming legal sets, it's going to be the D through E regulation marks. So those little letters on the bottom cards of the Sword and Shield cards. So this is how you figure it out. It's supposed to be, they made this so that it's much simpler to identify cards. I mean, it wasn't really complicated to begin with, in my opinion. They always announce the sets. It's just a few sets anyway, so people can easily figure things out. But it is what it is. It doesn't matter. It's still going to be the same. Essentially, what it is for this rotation is all of the GX/Sun and Moon sets they're going to rotate out. So Team Up, Unbroken Bonds, Unified Minds, Cosmic Eclipse, the Hidden Fate set, and I guess the Detective Pikachu cards too. They're all going to be rotating out, and it's going to be a Sword and Shield Gen 8, you could say, format and on. Okay, and now let's get into the team up set. So, besides Arceus that came in Cosmic Eclipse, this might very well be the most important set we're losing, and you'll find out why soon. But I guess this sort of set was the Tag Team intro set, you could say the Tag Team GX intro set, introduced the first batch of Tag Team GX Pokemon, and some of them did have like a big impact. Particularly Pikachu and Zekrom GX. But in my opinion, the biggest card from this set that we're losing is the Jirachi with Stellar Wish. So this card, as soon as that it was sort of revealed in the Dark Order set, I think it was the Japanese name or whatever, you could just see straight away, if you were even a decent Pokemon player, that this was going to be a really good card. And it definitely met expectations based on the EX Deoxys Jirachi from way back when. Amazing ability, and it essentially became the heart and soul consistency engine of a lot of decks. Malamar decks at that time sort of morphed to utilize this card with a bunch of switches. The Zapdos deck with Jirachi became a thing because of this Jirachi. And it only got better when we got Scoob Up Net, and it became more broken. You could put it into your hand, play another Jirachi down, we'll promote another Jirachi, use the effect, rinse and repeat, and get a bunch of Stellar Wishes in one turn. Really boost the consistency of any deck. Became a really sought after card, as much as Tapu Lele GX on TCG Online too. And the risk was really low, being a support Pokemon that was just a regular Pokemon. So for me, this is the number one card that we're losing from this set. And the structures for a lot of deck lists is going to change without this card around. Now, besides Jirachi, I mentioned Pikachu and Zekrom GX, and we're going to talk about this card next, and the other Tag Team GXs, I suppose. So this guy was the big attacker of this set, 2 extremely broken attacks, and the 240 HP was pretty strong at the time too. I mean, it's crazy to think about that just a few years and 240 HP for 3 prizes would be considered very low with the other Tag Team GXs and the VMAX Pokemon. But at the time, it was difficult to kill if you didn't hit it for weakness. And I mean, Full Blitz was a broken ass attack. Do high damage, grab energies to power another Pokemon, or just basically set up for Attack Bolt GX and get the extra plus snipe on the bench. Insane. I mean, Tapu Lele GX was the most popular support Pokemon at the time. And the thing is, like, since everybody was playing it, you were going to be able to kill like a regular Stage 1 GX that were being played at the time and get a KO on Tapu Lele GX 2 on the bench if they had no way to protect it, and just get 4 prizes immediately. So that was broken as fuck. And the thing is, coming right after the Lost Thunder set, which was the main set for broken lightning type support, this card exploded Thunder Mountain, Electro Power, Tapu Koko Prism in this set. It was just broken beyond belief. Extremely turbo, extremely powerful. And to be honest, even though it's not the most broken deck right now, it managed to stand the test of time pretty well. Even after the rotation of Lost Thunder, I didn't think much of it. I think it would be much weaker and any Pika decks still played competitively would slowly fade away because of other stronger decks and strategies, but it managed to hold its ground pretty well, and it's finally going to rotate out. Next up, we got my favorite of the bunch, Gengar Mimikyu GX. This card was mostly an expanded card, at least for me. Some people did try and use it in standard with the Alma Star that was going to block your opponent's items if you had less Pokemon, and this sort of build an item lock deck with this card as the attacker. I preferred Vileplume in expanded, more of a conventional traditional build to the old Vilegar of back in the day, DP days. But this was also a strong card in the right hands. It also saw some tech play in Malamar decks and in some Mewtwo GX decks. I guess you would see it there sometimes too. Very low HP at 240 these days, but back then I guess it was okay. Fighting resistance could be handy too. I mean, the broken things about this card, of course, was the attacks. Whorehouse GX, one of the most broken GX attacks ever, easiest to use GX attacks ever. Prevent your opponent from playing anything, and even let him draw cards to set up for a strong Poltergeist attack. And then Poltergeist, depending on all the trainers in their hand, 50 times the damage. So essentially, if they had 4 different trainers, you were going to do 200, one hit KO, a bunch of basic regular GX Pokemon, and a lot of Stage 1 GX Pokemon that were still being played. And with 5 trainers, you were basically getting a one hit KO on nearly everything at the time, bar something like Tag Team GXs from this set that went over 250 HP. So really sweet card, more of an expanded card, I would say, but still gonna rotate out from the standard format too. Next in this group of Tag Team GXs is the big and bad Eevee and Snorlax GX with 270 HP. During the time this guy came out, Stage 1 GXs were still used and were still very popular, in the case of Zoroark GX for example, and Dump Truck Press was your one-stop solution for those Pokemon. If you attacked an evolution Pokemon, it was going to do 240 damage. So this basically ensured that every Stage 1 GX was going to get one hit KO'd, no problems, not even any extra add-ons needed. And if you had something like a Choice Band on, you could even one hit KO Stage 2 GXs like Metagross, Solgaleo GX, etc. What made me really like this card when it was going to come out is the fact that it was a colorless Pokemon and needed all colorless energies to work. So you could easily take it in decks like Magnezone, decks that used other energy acceleration. I guess like Malamar, you could even throw this in, Metagross GX even, and you could easily meet the condition. You could use this with like Venusaur from Shining Legends attached to Grass Energies, and you were good to go. And launch some strong attacks. I mean, if you didn't hit an evolution Pokemon, then 120 for 4 was really bad. And obviously, introduced with his fellow Tag Team GX Pokemon, they were going to be the new hot thing, so you wouldn't be able to hurt them. But at least you had Megadon Fence GX too, which was a good, straightforward 210 GX attack. And if you had a 5th energy on, you could draw until you had 10 cards in hand, so that was also kind of useful. Because of the limitations of Dump Truck Press, this card was best used as a tech attacker in decks that could facilitate energy acceleration, like I've said. But it could be a really good answer at the right time. Was definitely a very good tech against evolution Pokemon. Moving on to the 4th Tag Team GX, Celebi and Venusaur GX, also with 270 HP. This card saw more hype than it actually bargained for. It was definitely a decent card, and I did use it in the Shining Legends Venusaur deck. I mean, it was going to be an obvious attacker in that sort of deck. It did see play in expanded and standard as part of Celebi and Venusaur sort of grass tank decks, and you could use Shaman to heal. There was a Shaman that could heal this card, and you could use other tactics. There was a Stage 2 Leaveney that also eventually came out that could help a tank as well. But because of the weakness of fire and because of the existence of attackers like Alternate Crossma GX, which could just save up the energies and score one hit KOs on this card, it never really met its potential. I think a lot of people hyped this card up and it just couldn't handle it. The best part about it is definitely the Evergreen GX attack, which I do think is one of the most broken GX attacks, even today. You do a solid 180 for 4 energies, and since we had Choice Band, you could boost it to 210 and even get 1 hit KOs and Stage 1 GXs while you did this, and heal all the damage on this guy. And this is definitely a big plus, considering we're talking about healing a 270 HP Pokemon here. And if you had an extra grass energy, like a 5th one, you could recover all cards from your discard pile into your deck, So Lysander's trump card style. Definitely useful. Definitely could be a double-edged sword as well when you're trying to thin your deck and you don't really want to gain this effect. I guess you're not going to attach the energy. But just because of the healing, just completely healing this card will do in 180, I think it's just too good. Besides the GX attack, I mean, Poland Hazard and Solar Beam was solid attacks considering this is a tank sort of Pokemon. I mean, Poland Hazard was going to be very annoying with the insta burn, confusion, and poison. Sort of stall out your opponent, make their life difficult. And all of these cards' attacks were DC compatible too, so that was good. I mean, by the time Unbroken Bonds came out, this card was already dead, along with most of the Grass GXs. But at the time, it was a decent card, and still one of the better Grass Tag Team GXs, I guess. It's not like we have too many anyway. Fourth guy is objectively the biggest of them all, breaking a new record when he came out, as usual with the HP. 300 HP Magikarp and Wailord Tag Team GX in this bitch. So this card, it had that insane HP. I mean, it speaks for itself. You could say it's still really high even today with the VMAXs, considering this guy is a basic Pokemon. This guy essentially shined in two ways. In Quagsire, Dragon Majesty Quagsire, water regulation, moving around energy decks. And if you're going to use it and expand it for the Troll Wailord EX evolution decks, you could say, the Troll Wailord EX deck, you just use this guy instead of that guy, and you gain the extra 50 HP to do the bullshit. That's basically it. At 5 water energies, 180 isn't the greatest thing in the world. It's actually kind of weak. I mean, if you can facilitate free water energies and just keep water energies around and build this guy up quickly, like in the Quagsire deck with Aqua Patches and shit, then I guess it was decent. And I guess the other use for this card as attack in Archie's Blastoise decks and in other water energy acceleration decks, I guess. Because Atara and Splash, I was never really a fan of this attack, but I guess some people liked it. If you had a freaking 8 water energies, I'm pretty sure, yeah. If you just have 1 water energy, it just does 10 damage. But if you have 8, it does 100 damage to your opponent's entire bench. So if they had a bunch of softened up Pokemon, you're going to get a bunch of KOs. Definitely a game-ending finishing attack for sure. But just too much trouble if you ask me, even if you could pull off the energy acceleration. There were better water energy GX attacks to use that would take so many energies. Like I would rather use Palkia GX's attack, just needs 5 energies and a more broken effect if you ask me. But nevertheless, this card did see its fair share of play. Like once upon a time, those Quagsire water decks were kind of strong, difficult to set up. But if they did, they were definitely trouble. And this guy was the key attacker in those decks for sure. Another Tag Team GX that became invisible eventually. It's kind of crazy that these cards are still around and they're rotating just now. But I don't know if this guy would still be seeing some play if Quagsire and Aqua Patch were still around. Mostly, I think people just couldn't use this card anymore anyway. So it was due to the previous rotation that it stopped seeing play, rather than the weakness. But anyway, it too is a Tag Team GX that is going to be leaving. And then the last Tag Team GX, this one is the most depressing of them all. It has the most beautiful art. It's probably the most beautiful Tag Team GX, the full art one I have right here. And it's so depressing because they just ruined it completely. So Latias and Latios GX, 250 HP, 1 retreat, decent stats at the time I guess for the Tag Team GXs, but both very underwhelming attacks, particularly the first one, Buster Purge. So this attack needs 4 energies, 2 psychics, 1 water, and 1 whatever, and you do 240 and then you gotta discard 3. So you might think to yourself, alright, 240, it's gonna get a lot of 1-hit KOs, right? Right. But you gotta remember, Ultra Necrozma GX was also a card around at the time that essentially had a much better attack on a Pokemon that had much less risk to it since it was a regular GX. This guy's Tag Team GX carried more risk, so you'd think it'd have a better attack, but no, it actually has a worse attack. Like, not only could Ultra Necrozma GX use its attack quicker, like you could do less damage for less energies if you wanted to, it's actually going to do more damage too if you discard the same amount of energies. So that's absolutely crazy, man. Like I'm pretty sure it does like 260 damage or something if you discard 3 or something like that. Latios and Latias do 240 and you discard 3. So the outclassing is very real. Arrow Unit GX, its GX attack also isn't very hot. I mean, Turtonator GX, a fire Pokemon, used to have a similar attack, and it did see more play at the time because of the nature of the format. But I mean, by the time this card came out, Malamar was a thing, Psychic Energy Acceleration, we were good with that. So dumping a bunch of energies and then trying to use this guy's attack, wasting your GX attack essentially to grab energies, just didn't make a lot of sense. And you were never going to be able to get the additional plus, I guess, in time. If you're going to use an attack like this to grab energies from the discard pile, you want to use it early. And if you want to use it early, you're probably not going to have a psychic and a water energy on, so you can get the immunity effect as well. Like the additional effect is if you have a water energy too, then it's going to be immune to everything your opponent does on the next turn. Um, Very underwhelming, difficult to pull off, doesn't make a lot of sense. It really sucks. I tried building this card in standard and expanded, but I just never ended up showcasing it because it was really underwhelming. I mean, it wasn't good enough. It just couldn't make the cut. It was inferior to Ultra Necrozma GX. It carried a lot more risk with the 250 HP and being a tag team GX Pokemon. I mean, same weakness. I mean, it was a dragon Pokemon. Just too many similarities. The only thing, I mean, that was different from Ultra Necrozma GX was the Arrow Unit GX. So you kind of had to build your deck to take advantage of this attack, and that was shit. I mean, you were already setting up for a shit strategy from the beginning. So, very, very sad, very unfortunate, as this sort of Latios and Latias full art is very beautiful. I love the sunset in the background as they're shaping a sort of a heart shape there. Now, by this set, regular GXs were starting to become more and more irrelevant, but they were still introducing them in these sets, obviously. And we got a few of them here too. A basic Hoopa GX from this set with 190 HP. This was a decent Darkness Pokemon, I guess. Could give you a bit of support in your eventually when the Weavile GX decks became a thing, Dark Box. Rogue Ring was a good early attack, could search you any of 2 cards, put them into your hand. Dark Strike, decent 3 energy attack if you wanted to hit something hard. And Devilish Hands GX, probably the best thing about this card. A Snipe GX attack that you have a lot of control of. I mean, it essentially maxes out at 180 damage that you can spread in a bunch of different EXs and GXs. So this could have been really nice, but obviously not very power creep lasting. And it saw little play. I did see it in a bunch of decks, used the support, some darkness decks in standard and expanded, but never really became a thing, I guess. We got a stage 2 darkness GX as well. Incineroar, we got a fire one and we got a darkness one in here too. I think it was the only sort of a starter that got an additional GX from a different type. I don't think, yeah, we didn't get anything for the fairy water starter. I don't remember its name. And Decidei. But for this guy, it was a stage 2. You could build a deck around him since he was gonna self-charge his attacks with Scar Charge. Once during your turn, you could put 3 damage counters on this Pokemon, grab 3 Darkness Energies and put him on this guy. So your attacks were going to be ready. The abilities sort of synergize with Darkness Tornado too. An intense sort of outrage attack, more damage counters, you would do 50 more damage. Crushing Punch, kind of weak, but I guess you were going to discard special energies too. You could use it as a stage 2 Pokemon, but nobody did. People either used it in Greninja Zoroark GX decks when they became a thing as a means to instantly get a lot of darkness energy, and that guy was going to be ready, hitting for a lot of damage. And in Mewtwo GX decks, they usually have it around, I guess, as a means to use the GX attack and get a big KO easily if you damage the Mewtwo even a little bit. But that's about it. Just help for Greninja Zoroark, Darkness Turbo decks, and Mewtwo. That's it. Didn't do anything on its own either. And for the last regular GX we got here, we got Cobalion GX with a very weak 170 HP, but I guess it was maybe a bit normal at the time. This card essentially shared Virizion EX's amazing ability where Pokemon with metal energies weren't going to be affected by special conditions, and you would remove any existing conditions. Of course, in a format where it's not dominated by hypnotoxic laser and cards like that, it didn't see the same success. But you actually do see it every now and then in metal decks in standard and expanded too, as a support Pokemon to help against those status conditions. It's still a decent pick, so I think some metal decks might miss it after the rotation. Attack was okay. If there was a stadium, you were gonna do 110 for 2. That's not bad. And then the Iron Rule GX attack. If you wanted a guaranteed stall turn, like stall for time, and you just weren't ready, you couldn't do anything else, I guess you could use the GX attack and just guard yourself for one turn. But that's about it. This card doesn't have anything else. For a basic GX package though, it's good enough. I mean, it's great actually. You got a good ability, decent attack, and useful GX attack working with any energy that can come up. I mean, it was good. It was just the format didn't really make it shine at its best. Like I've said, I mean, status conditions, they're always a thing in a way, but they're to a different extent in other formats. Like, for example, going back into the EX era, Hypnotoxic Laser with Verbank City Gym was one of the most broken interactions. So Virizion EX stopping that was a huge deal. In this guy's era, not so much, but still a good card. Also going to be leaving. We also got 4 Prism cards here, worth a damn. For the Pokemon, we got Tapu Koko Prism and Shaman Prism. Shaman Prism was a solid grass regular Pokemon, I guess, in grass decks that had some good grass energy acceleration, like Rillaboom is a good example right now. We still have it. And before Rillaboom, we had Shining Legends Venusaur. I also used this card alongside it. 80 HP was low as fuck, but at least you had for retreat, and the main thing you were going to use this card for is the Flower Storm attack. With a lot of grass energies around, this attack was going to be very powerful. So just because of that, it sort of secured its place in those decks. Like, if you needed a regular grass attacker in that kind of a deck, I don't see why you wouldn't look at this card as one of your top picks, if not the number 1 pick. Also leaving from Team Up. And then Tapu Koko Prism, the more famous one I guess from this set. This Pokemon was one of the big lightning type support cards that came out in the Sun and Moon era and just barely survived the previous rotation by coming in this team up set rather than Lost Thunder. And it was one of the few things that the Pikarom decks and other lightning decks could hang on to, I guess. Even though they lost Thunder Mountain, they could still rely on this guy, I guess, for a little bit of mini energy acceleration. So with its ability, you would sacrifice this guy, your opponent wouldn't get any prizes for it, and you could grab 2 lightning energies from the discard pile, attach them to any of your bench Pokemon. Well, technically it had to be 2 different bench Pokemon, but you know what I mean of course. One off thing, since this guy is a Prism card, you only have 1 in the deck, but still very powerful, still sees play to this day, and best part is that it doesn't have to be lightning Pokemon, you can grab lightning energies, so obviously lightning Pokemon are the first candidates. This card could be used with anything, like I used it in a Dragonite GX deck, Stage 2 GX deck. It's a common card seen in like Giratina Garchomp, Naganadel Guzzlord decks, and Expanded. You would see it pop up in a lot of different decks. Like I saw a Kyogre brush deck that tried to use this card. New Kyogre from Champion's Path or Vivid Voltage or something. Just a very good card because of a very good ability. 100%. Also leaving from this set, and it's going to be a major bro for the lightning type once again. I mean, I do wonder if they're going to have anything to even replace this guy that's going to come close. So Tapu Koko Prism also out of the picture. And for the other 2 Prism cards, there are the Prism Stadiums, Black Market, and a Wondrous Labyrinth. Black Market, obviously a broken effect. When a Darkness Pokemon with Darkness Energy got KO'd, your opponent would take 1 fewer prize card. So broken ass effect, and obviously as one of the Prism Stadiums, it was sort of immune to stuff like Field Blower and other supporter effects that could discard stadium cards, I guess. I actually never got to use this. I never managed to get a single one on TCG Online, which is insane. But obviously a lot of people that use Darkness decks did include it. It could help out your opponent if you had at the wrong time out. But you definitely wanted to make sure to get rid of this if you could before you got a KO so that your opponent didn't get the plus even once out of this. Because even if they got the plus once out of this, it was broken. And then Wondrous Labyrinth, this was more common, I guess, in the meta because it had other implications besides just being used in fairy Pokemon decks. Like the attacks of non-fairy Pokemon would cost 1 colorless more. So even if you weren't using like a fairy Pokemon deck so that it wouldn't affect you. Other sort of troll decks and other decks that sort of build themselves so that it wouldn't affect this would use this, so it would just annoy you. Definitely a strong stadium for sure. Once again, as a Prism Stadium, your opponent wasn't going to be able to get rid of it unless they used another stadium or Mershadow. But it also leaves. And I guess I forgot to mention in the beginning as well, with the Sun and Moon sets, all of them rotating, and then GX era rotating, I guess, all of the GX sets pretty much leaving. Support for Dragon type Pokemon and Fairy type Pokemon is going to be gone completely. So you can't even use, you won't be able to use basic fairy energies either. They're going to be completely illegal in standard after rotation. So just know you can't use them if you didn't know that. Gone is the fairy type and the dragon type. For now, I guess. Alright, now before we get into the regular Pokemon in this set, we gotta talk about some key trainers and supporters. The biggest one for me personally is Eriga's Hospitality. Now, even though I say that, I never maxed Eriga's Hospitality in any of my decks, like running a full playset or even 3. I mostly use 1 or maybe 2 as a sort of tech supporter in decks. Obviously because if it's your only supporter and you gotta use it and your opponent doesn't have a lot of Pokemon, then it's basically a useless supporter. But the reason that I say it's huge for me is because, I don't know, I just feel like since the rotation of Cynthia, we haven't really gotten that replacement supporter. I guess this was the closest thing in the way because she could give you a lot of draw if your opponent had a bunch of Pokemon out. But I mean, I'm not really satisfied with the supporters that we have. And it's gonna be even worse when she leaves because we won't be able to use her either. So big loss for me. Hopefully we get some better replacement supporters in the future. Like they just give us a Cynthia replacement back or something. But Erica's Hospitality is leaving, unfortunately. Quickly mention Brock's Grit too. They sort of brought this guy back from his evolution print. Same effect. You could shuffle 6 any combination of Pokemon and basic energy cards from this onto the deck. So mass Pokemon and energy recovery in a supporter form. So if you wanted the best recovery, this was your guy, of course. It's also leaving. I never used it because I don't want to use a supporter for this sort of effect. But a lot of people did play it, did use it. It did have its place in certain decks. So another good card leaving from Team Up. Then we got Ingo and Emmet, the train guys from Black and White, like the battle train bosses, you could say. This card, I did use it in a brief window when we had an even bigger lag of supporters, as this card was essentially a shittier Juniper, you could say. You were going to dump your hand and draw 5 cards, but you had the option to draw from the top or the bottom, and you get to see the card from the top of your deck before you choose where you want to draw from. So you got 2 less cards, but it granted you a little bit of control. This sort of Juniper effect, still, you dump and draw. But 5, I mean, it wasn't a big enough number. If it was at least 6, then it would have been better, and it granted you that extra control of you see the top card and then you can choose to draw from the top or bottom. Like I said, did use it a little bit, but then eventually had to drop it after we got stuff like Marnie and other supporters. So even with the lack of supporters, in my opinion, there were still better options than this guy. So yeah, this isn't a very big loss, especially since we have Juniper and Magnolia right now. I think nobody's gonna care. Like, I've actually never seen anybody use this card since forever. Like, it was probably 2 years ago when I last saw this card being played by anybody. And then after these guys, we basically have the whole group of the Battle Amazon leader chicks, I guess you could say. Morgan and then the rest of them. I'm not going to go through the effects of the other chicks besides Morgan because primarily if these cards were being used, it was for the sort of Morgan combo. Try to add the rest of the chicks and then discard them. And you're granted access to impressive energy acceleration. Reveal the top 12 cards of your deck, grab any energies, even special ones, and attach them to your Pokemon. So Morgan and then the other chicks, this sort of combo was used quite enough times, I would say. People tried to use it with Gardevoir and Sylveon GX. They tried to use it with other Pokemon like the Guzzlord GX. I played against somebody that tried to use this with Darkrai Umbreon GX and Greninja Zoroark as an additional attacker. And a lot of different other Pokemon that don't come to mind, but sort of combo decks and sort of FTK decks, you could say, were built around these chicks. So another notable set of supporters, I guess, as a group going together. Oh, and before I forget, we also lose Bill's Analysis from this set. This card was essentially like a double Skyla that you had a lot less control of. and if you were really unlucky, you weren't even going to get anything. But you reveal the top 7 cards, and you could grab 2 trainer cards from the top of your deck. Now, this card did see a bit of a play, I suppose, when it just came out. But when green slash blues search got released, it essentially replaced it as a sort of a better card to instantly grab specific trainers from your deck. I mean, at the time this card came out, I don't think Skyla was in the format either, but Volkner was, and even if you weren't using a lightning deck, I still thought that guy was better because you can just guarantee get an item card. This you could get trainers, but you could miss it if you were really unlucky revealing a bunch of Pokemon energies, and you only had the options of the top 7 cards of your deck, so you weren't going to be able to get what you really wanted most of the time. You could get 2 cards, and if you were really lucky, it was going to be a major plus, major bonus. Get 2 cards and you get what you want is great. But once again, not very consistent, and Green Surge basically replaced it when it came out. Now we move on to some regular items. We don't have too many, but I guess the biggest one would be Pokemon Communication from this set, originally appearing in the Heart Gold Soul Silver set. Good card from back then. They kept reprinting it here and there, and this is the latest print, I guess, in Team Up. If you were running a lot of evolution Pokemon or just had a decent chunk of Pokemon in your deck and you could easily make it live, it was a good card, especially in a format where we didn't have too many options of Pokemon fetchers that were just items. So good card also leaving. Then we got the Judge Whistle, simple card just letting you draw 1 card. The Judge effect didn't really come up. Marnie essentially replaced Judge, as you still put your opponent to 4 cards, but you could draw 5, so completely better. But outside of the Judge recovery effect, I did like this card as an alternative to Acrobike, since you could just draw 1 card, but you didn't have to discard. It didn't give you the flexibility of Acrobike, I guess the additional option to get what you want, which is why I feel like most people didn't even look at this card. But for me, I'm a sort of Yu-Gi-Oh player at heart. When I look at this card, it's like I'm looking at Upstart Goblin from Yu-Gi-Oh! And a lot of times I don't want to be in the position where I have to discard a card with Acrobike. I mean, of course, Acrobike has its place in a lot of decks that I use. But after Celestial Storm rotated out, we didn't have Acrobike anyway, so if you wanted to use a card like that, Judge Whistle was your best option. So decent little item draw card. If you had the space and you could afford to run cards like that in your deck, you could boost the consistency, I guess, boost the speed of your deck. Another nice card we're losing from Team Up. Next up, we got the Metal Goggles for the Metal decks. When Frying Pan rotated out, this I guess was the best tool to attach to your Metal Pokemon. Decrease the damage, same effect, and your opponent's attacks and abilities can't put damage counters on it. Really good effect. Stopped a lot of sort of meta cards like Galarian Zigzagoon and other ways your opponent could mess up your Pokemon through abilities and effects. I preferred the Frying Pan to get rid of the weakness, but Metal Goggles definitely saw a lot of play in Metal decks if you wanted to use a defensive tool pretty much. Also leaving. And then the last item is a Dangerous Drill. I didn't really like this card when I first reviewed it, and still don't. It's basically a flexible but high cost removal card. You can discard either a Pokemon tool, Special Energy, or Stadium, but you have to specifically discard a Darkness Pokemon from your hand. So it would only have a place in Darkness decks or just decks that ran a lot of Darkness Pokemon if you wanted to get this effect. What kind of bums me about this card is that you only get to discard 1 thing. So if you're just going to use it to discard tools and stadiums, then it wasn't going to be as effective as Field Blower. Field Blower, you can discard 2 things and it's costless. If you were just going to discard a Special Energy, then Enhanced Hammer is superior. So I guess it really is what it is. You trade cost for flexibility. But once again, even at that, it should have been you just discard 1 Pokemon or just any card, to be honest. It didn't have to be Darkness Pokemon. That specific condition really limited its usage, but I guess maybe it's for the best. Maybe not discard any card, but maybe discard any Pokemon, or I don't know, just maybe give additional types. As far as I'm concerned, very little play this card saw in Darkness decks. Maybe some Eternatus decks ran it as a tech. I personally never used it in any Dark deck that I ran. But anyway, maybe some people like this card. Also leaving. And for the final trainer card, before we check out some regular Pokemon, we have a regular Stadium, Viridian Forest. I wasn't a fan of this card either, but let me tell you, it did help me a lot so many times when my opponent played it. I just always found a way to exploit it. Just so many interactions, thinning your hand to draw more cards, getting an energy that you needed, Just so many different plays, dumping stuff you don't need. Solid effect, of course, just discard any card to get any energy, so energy search, really good. But I just never liked it because I never liked the idea of my opponent benefiting from my stadium so much. And this is the case for me, like I benefited so much from people using this stadium in their decks. So this is why I never ran it, but a lot of people did run it. It was everywhere in Malamar decks when it came out, and other decks that tried to get specific energies just get energy search without using energy spinner. This, at least, it was a stadium, so you could use it as a counter stadium if you didn't have any specific stadium you were running, and also use it to grab basic energies. So I definitely know this card is going to matter for a lot of people that is rotating. Viridian Forest, even though I never used it, I'm definitely going to miss exploiting the effect when my opponent played it. Believe that. And then for the last group of cards from Team Up is the regular Pokemon, the most forsaken group in the TCG right now, period. This set gave me some false hope about maybe some Stage 2s making a comeback, as it included 3 Stage 2s that had some decent potential, but as always, it's just decent and it never goes anywhere. 2 of which were the Kanto starters, Charizard and Blastoise. Not only were these solid Stage 2s, solid in quotation marks, but better than average, I guess. They also pushed them by being the main cards in like the theme decks of this set, like the Team Up theme decks. You had the Charizard one and the Blastoise one, so you had easy access to them too. Blastoise, I guess, was the more reliable one in a meta where Stage 2s aren't really used to attack and you're best using them to support. With Powerful Squall, it was water energy acceleration from the deck, not from the hand like most Blastoise cards. You revealed the top 6 cards of your deck, and you could grab any water energies, attach them to your Pokemon in any way you like. So it was a sort of different take on the Deluge / Rain Dance Blastoise. In a way, not as consistent, but depending on the circumstance, it could even be more consistent than Rain Dance and Deluge because you grabbed the cards from the deck. You didn't have to see them in hand, grab them in hand, and then attach them. So you didn't have to rely on methods to grab the energies from the deck to the hand, like Professor Letter, Energy Search, and what have you. Unfortunately, people really dismissed this card too quickly. Even before Frostmoth came out, that gave it the biggest competition for water energy acceleration. I feel like people dismissed this card too quickly. If you saw it in like Blastoise GX decks made to work together. The Piplup Blastoise Tag Team GX. And for the very big daredevils, I guess, you could have seen this with Wailord GX and Quaxar, all in the same deck. I wanted to try it out, but I never got enough copies, and even today I don't think I have enough copies to make a good engine with him. But I did manage to get Frostmoth, so it basically got replaced before I had the chance to use it. And if we're being honest, Frostmoth is more consistent. It's a Stage 1, it has the limitations of you can attach to the active, and it has to be a water Pokemon only, but let's be honest, we're probably going to be using water Pokemon anyway, and the flexibility and speed is just too good by just being a Stage 1 as opposed to being a Stage 2. You can basically gain like 4 to 5 cards of extra space in your deck that you don't have to spend with stuff like Rare Candy and Stage 1s for the Stage 2, so on and so forth. As an attacker, he wasn't that great. 150 for 3 is decent, I guess, but you would also hurt yourself for 30, and that was bad. People really forgot about it and just didn't use it. So I think even if it rotated like a year ago, it wasn't really going to matter. For most players anyway, not all players, but it is rotated now, so his playing standard is finished. As for the fire starter, Charizard, this guy also had a very good ability, Roaring Resolve, but this was for self-energy acceleration. You can put 2 damage counters on this guy, grab 2 fire energies, and pretty much he's ready to go. Continuous Blaze Ball needs only 2 fire energies. You had to discard all fire energies every time you attacked. For 2, you were starting at 130 damage. If you discarded 3, 180. And then by discarding 4 or more, you were getting a one-hit knockouts and a lot of significant Pokemon. Once again, Stage 1 GXs were a thing back then. So this guy could easily kill them, and it was the best thing about him, to be honest. And really, if you just had 5 fire energies, you could even one-hit KO Tag Team GXs. So it wasn't a card you could take lightly if it had a lot of fire energies on. Of course, Welder helped it drastically too. You had your manual attachment, Roaring Resolve, and Welder. If you could pull that full combination of energy acceleration, you could one-hit KO anything you wanted almost. Not even almost, this was before VMAXs, so I guess the only body that was going to survive with 5 energies I think was Wailord with 300 HP. That's it. That guy, and I guess the Bird Trio GX, Moltres, Articuno, and Zapdos when they came out. Unfortunately though, like with all stage 2s, the curse of the just 150 HP wasn't good enough. It just is not good enough. It wasn't good enough when it was coming out, and it's not good enough now when they keep printing stage 2s with 160 HP and shit, and 170. He was likely gonna die in one shot, and if he wasn't, and he could barely survive, because you were using Roaring Resolve to put damage counters on his ass, you were softening it up to get KO'd anyway. Now, even though I say that, it did see moderate play as probably one of the very few Stage 2 Pokemon that could do anything. And as a fire Pokemon, it had a lot of support going for it when Unbroken Bonds came out. You know, the Welder, the Fire Stadiums, the Fire Crystal, all that good stuff. There's the new sort of a Leon Charizard deck, I guess, that some people try and play. It's not that good in Standard. It's better in Expanded because you can use Battle Compressor and dub the supporters there. But even if you use that Charizard, I did see people taking this Charizard in as well, like having one copy just for the Roaring Resolve, I guess. I have no idea why do you do that. Maybe if you don't have enough Charizards. But I did see it being tech there. Either way, it's also rotating as well. And then for the last really good quote-unquote Stage 2, my favorite of the bunch is Nidoqueen here with Queen's Call and Power Lariat. I had a lot of fun using this card, I'm not gonna lie, even if it wasn't the best, and the power creep, it started feeling the power creep really quickly. I mean, Power Lariat, it was gonna be good, but you could never really take advantage of the full bench damage unless you were using like Meganium with it as well, which isn't the way I used it. I used it with Pidgeotos, I used it with other Stage 1 Pokemon for support and draw. But if you had a full bench of evolution Pokemon, you could essentially do 260 damage. That was the max amount. If you could do that, and this card had a choice band on, you were doing 290, so you could one-hit KO Tag Team GXs. But when I used it, I usually had 4 evolved Pokemon when this card was going to attack, because of course, you know, 160 HP, they get one shot, then you promote the other one, and then you play a basic Pokemon down for a replacement. I did 210 most of the time. And that was still pretty good, as you would one-hit KO most of the Stage 1 GXs, I guess, which were meta when this card first came out. And if you were doing 210 and had the choice band, that was 240, so you could one-hit KO a lot of Stage 2 GXs too, like Gardevoir. And then the other beautiful thing that really pushed this card to be good was Queen's Call. Self-sufficient consistency for your evolution deck is one of their biggest problems with the weakening of rare candy and the faster paced formats. With Queen's Call, you could grab your evolution Pokemon as long as they weren't GXs or EXs, and we could set up our evolution Pokemon quicker. We could get additional Nidoqueens out quicker. You get the second Nidoqueen, get another Queen's Call, search another Pokemon. Rinse and repeat really help you set up your Pokemon quickly and get the bonus of Power Lariat quickly, which is what you wanted. But alas, even if it was kinda good in the beginning, I quickly found out as I was using it that it couldn't keep up and you needed a lot of luck for it to work. Once again, the HP sort of held it back, but even more so, I think the attack really held it back. If only if it was a bit stronger, just more base damage, or, I mean, in the beginning I thought this effect worked with any Pokemon on your bench, so even basics, and I thought it was going to be broken. I thought finally Stage 2s might make a comeback with this card. Now, maybe that was going to be too much if it worked with just any Pokemon, but whatever, I didn't care. But since they made the bonus coming from evolution Pokemon, so it was going to max out at 260 with evolved Pokemon on your bench, I think the base damage should have been a bit higher, like maybe start at 40 base damage before the extra boosts, like 40 base damage and then it gets 50 for each evolved Pokemon. It was going to be much better, man, much better. Like, I wouldn't have even mind if it was 50 or 60. Like, seriously, they made these cards to be limited, to be in check. Like, let's just make them kinda good, but we don't want them to be on par with the rule box Pokemon GXs, Vs, VMAXs, whatever. I am fully confident that even if it started at like 50 base damage before the boosts, it wasn't going to be a tier 0 deck, it wasn't even going to be a tier 1 deck, probably. But it would have been a big help. Anyway, my Nidoqueen is also rotating out. You served me kinda well, I guess, for the time that I did use it. I updated it a bunch of times and wanted to use it more, but it couldn't work. So we had to let it go. It's gonna rotate out now anyway. So goodbye, Nidoqueen. Then we got the Fossil Duo, Omastar and Kabutops. These guys are technically Stage 2s, but they're their own thing by being fossils. Between the two of them, Omastar had a little bit more significance than Kabutops because it could be used with Tag Team GX Gengar Mimikyu, I guess. I was never a fan of it, but most people, if they used Gengar for its own deck, main attacker, they used it with Omastar here. I mean, they came together in the same set. I guess the Pokemon Company were saying, hey, use them like this. I use Gengar with Vileplume, like I've said, but I suppose you could use it with this guy too. With Fossil Bind, if you had fewer Pokemon in play than your opponent, then they couldn't play any item cards from their hand, and you could still play item cards from your hand. So I guess that was the bonus versus Vileplume. But to me, it wasn't very consistent. I would rather have a proper item lock and not worry about what my opponent is doing, giving them a little bit of control. For sure, you could get by with only a few Pokemon on your bench. Like, really all you need is Gengar and Omastar. You don't need anybody else to work. So this combo was possible. Most people will probably have more than just two Pokemon on the bench, but your opponent still had that chance to play around it. Ideally, you would want to have some backup in case they picked on the Omastar. Like, you want to have two guys down. And if you do, then you got three Pokemon. If you wanted to have a second Gengar as backup, now it's four. So before you know it, Fossil Bind isn't really that reliable. This is why I didn't like it. But it did see some play in this respect. I guess other uses for this card was sort of a combo lock, troll decks, the eternal ones that try to do bullshit. This card could be used in those types of decks, I guess, too. Whatever the fuck combos people try and use, I can't really talk in depth. If you play a lot like me, there's always some bullshit that's gonna come up, some sort of a crazy deck that somebody's gonna want to try it out. And then Kabutops, this guy was cursed compared to Omastar this time around, surprisingly, because usually they make Kabutops cards better than Omastar. But this time he got the short end of the stick, as he needed to be active to get his lock effect. This guy would lock supporter cards, and this is a very broken effect, of course, but you gotta be active to gain it. And of course, having a weak stage 2 like this guy active wasn't gonna get you far. It had the incredibly low 140 HP. Rock Slide did just 80 for 3 and then 20 damage to two of your opponent's bench Pokemon. So it was going to max out at 120 damage if you could get the maximum plus. Very, very weak. I don't care that it was DC compatible or Twin Energy compatible or whatever. It didn't do shit. And it's a shame because this lock ability is good. Locking supporters, of course. Really, the best way you had a chance to really exploit this guy, it would be in like hit and switch decks, like maybe if you used it with Hitmonchan, I guess, which ironically is in this set, but some sort of hit and switch Pokemon promote this guy and lock supporters, I guess, but it had competition with other walls too, and of course, as a stage 2 fossil, you were going to have the difficulty of getting him out in play in the first place. So would you really want to make your deck so inconsistent to lock supporters when you could lock something else or just promote another wall Pokemon or just something that could have given you just as good of an edge but be more consistent? It's no surprise nobody almost used it, but it's rotating right now anyway. After these guys, we have some stage 1s, the most notable one for me being Alolan Muck. When this card was going to come out, it did see a little bit of hype. I was personally scared as well, thinking that it was going to be really hot, because we had the Trashlands Garbodor, and that was already on its own a very strong mid to late game card capable of dealing a lot of damage depending on your opponent's items. And with this card coming out, the idea was you didn't even have to worry about your opponent playing the items. You could just force them to mill them with this guy. It was a heavy duty milling card and it fueled Trashlands Garbodor's attack. They basically went perfectly together. Now, in the end, it didn't do pretty much anything in standard. I did try and use it. I think some other people tried to experiment and use it as well, but since they were both stage 1s, and because of the nature of the available cards we had back then when it comes to consistency in standard, it wasn't that easy to build. In the end, I did build a deck with them in expanded, and I used it quite extensively actually. It did put in some work. A lot of decks in Expanded are also item heavy anyway, and they play a bunch of items like the Battle Compressor decks and other speedy item decks, so they would be building up Garbodor's attack anyway. And with Alolan Muck, you got that additional extra help to be able to get one-hit knockouts with ease. Clever people could play around it, and after Arceus Zacian became a thing, I found that it was really useless, of course, against them, but definitely one of the notable stage 1s from Team Up. For some players, the big stage 1 from this set would be this Gyarados with 150 HP. This was a very strong stage 1 on its own that could be basically used for its own attacker in its own deck. Probably not as unique as the very old Stormfront Gyarados deck, but kinda close. With Distilled Blast, you reveal the top 7 cards of your deck, and this attack was going to do 30 more damage times the amount of water energy you revealed there. Now, unlike other similar attacks, you actually didn't discard the water energies, but discarded the other non-water energy cards. So what it meant was you got rid of the other unnecessary cards that weren't going to boost this guy's attack, leaving the water energies, and eventually you could be easily revealing 6 to 7 water energies and doing the incredible 240 for just one. Of course, what people did is they built a deck around this attack and this card. So you would use cards like Alolan Vulpix to search out the Magikarps and I guess Ditto. Since you were going to have a lot of water energies, the ones that were stuck in your hand were kind of useless, so Crash Awake was a good way to search 2 cards of exactly what you needed and then discard them. One of the very few decks where I could see that card being used and recommended. And try to grab some rescue stretchers too to recover KO'd Gyarados. I tried to use this card myself, but then eventually gave up really quickly on it. But I know a lot of people did like this deck and did use it. Eventually it kind of faded out, like a lot of the things here. After Gyarados, we have Ninetales. Now, Ninetales was in a pretty unique spot in that when it came out, Guzma was still available in the format, so people opted to use that card. Pooling is obviously a very strong strategy that can decide games, so he was seeing play for as long as he was around, but then when it rotated, we didn't really have any replacement. The closest thing was this Ninetales for fire decks that could utilize it. With 9 Temptations, you could discard 2 fire energy cards from your hand and pull an opponent's Pokemon from the bench. You would normally see it alongside Reshiram Charizard GX. I can't really think of any other fire decks that utilized it, maybe Blacephalon, but I would say not really. Another card that faded out as the format was changing, and especially when we got Boss's Orders, not even fire decks needed to use this. Also rotating, and then the Alolan Ninetales with the Luminous Barrier. This was basically the fairy version of the water one from Guardians Horizon, I believe. Just block effects and damage from GX Pokemon and EX Pokemon. With all GXs completely living standard now, it would have no use if it stayed anyway. We also have Alolan Exeggutor, another alternative type on stage 1 from a different set. The Grass Alolan Exeggutor from I think Ultra Prism or Forbidden Light, I don't really remember, but it's the one with Tropical Shake. This card was another one of these few stage 1s I guess that was seeing some play as its own deck. It can hit for a max amount of 120 damage for 1 energy, depending on your other types of basic energies in the discard pile. And since it also had 160 HP for a stage 1, it was kinda respectable at the time. Never used it myself, but it did come up a lot in matches, and since this card was a dragon type, then it could also be paired with the stage 1 Altaria too from Dragon Majesty, and you could boost the damage even further with that. Faded out once again, of course, because there's no way it could compete with Tag Team GXs, especially VMAXs, and just huge ass Pokemon that would knock it out in one hit anyway. It too will now rotate. Damn, almost forgot about Airmail Pidgeotto. Scratch what I said about the Alolan Muck. This is the most notable stage 1 from this set for me. This was a solid draw support Pokemon that you could easily splash in decks in multiples thanks to Professor Elm from Lost Thunder. Since it had 60 HP, you could search it easily alongside the Pidgeys, and then before you know it, set up a bunch of Pidgeotos and draw multiple cards per turn. Its effect was essentially an Acropike that you didn't discard, instead you put the other card at the bottom of your deck. So it wasn't crazy mass draw, but it was efficient enough, especially since you could get multiples out easily thanks to Professor Elm. The best use of this card for me, of course, was with Nidoqueen. I think in a way it wasn't a coincidence they introduced this alongside with Nidoqueen in the same set. It was just a very easy stage 1 to get out, and it would help you draw additional cards too. So they made great sense together, and they really helped out Nidoqueen a lot. Unfortunately, this card also saw a lot of play in Ranguru troll decks and other troll decks as a way to draw cards so they could fuel the resources of the bullshit crushing hammers and other shit they would use. But it did get replaced with Cinccino, especially when Professor Elm got rotated out. And I don't really see anyone using Pidgeotto now. They'd use Cinccino, and Pidgeotto will rotate out soon, nevertheless. This is also the set we got Fossil Fangs Aerodactyl, definitely the most successful of the fossils in here, and one of the strongest fossil Pokemon we've seen in a while. Since Aerodactyl is kinda like a stage 1, it was the easiest one to get out, and you could easily power up its attack with DC and triple acceleration energy, especially when that came out. I originally thought when I reviewed it in the Japanese set that it would just do 180 damage to GXs and EXs, and that would already be a very solid attack, but it was actually even stronger. If you just don't have any GXs or EXs on your bench, it does 180 to everything. You could dish out some pretty heavy damage on just a regular stage 1 Pokemon, but once again, even though people did try it out, it never really became super meta. More like an anti-meta rogue deck, I guess, and it faded out eventually, just like a little Executor and the other cards I mentioned. Even with an attack like this, you can't keep up with the Tag Team GXs and VMAXs. And of course, we can't forget that with 130 HP, it was gonna die in one shot always. And then for the final stage 1, this is more of a novelty mention, the Doublade from this set, just because it has Tool Drop. Didn't see any play at all. I actually built a deck around it when we had the Genesect GX2 where you could attach 2 tools instead of just 1. So they had that obvious synergy to work together if you wanted to build Tool Drop. But it just wasn't good enough. The damage wasn't that high. You certainly needed a lot of resources. And with 90 HP, it definitely could never take a hit. Like at least some of the other dudes like Aerodactyl with 130 HP and then the other stage ones that had 160, maybe you could take a few shots. Like from stuff like Zoroark GX where you could do 120 I guess, another Pokemon that did that sort of damage back then. But 90 HP, you weren't surviving anything. And now finally, we have a few regular basic Pokemon, starting with the legendary bird trio, Moltres, Articuno, and Zapdos. My favorite of the bunch was the Moltres here because it was like a dream come true Pokemon when I first saw this and reviewed this, because it could do 180 damage for 4 energy. You got to discard 3. So it was basically going to be a perfect Pokemon in M-board decks that I like to use. I did also briefly use it in Standard when Unbroken Bonds was fresh. We got Welder and the other good Fire Trainer cards. And Kiawe was still around as well. So I was experimenting with Welder decks with Kiawe. And it just made sense to use this as a good regular fire Pokemon that could do a lot of damage. 180 with the choice band, it was going to be 210. You could get one-hit knockouts on stage 1 GXs. I mean, you had to discard a bunch of energies, which probably wasn't going to be good when you don't have a continuous ability like Inferno Fandango, but it was a decent card. Had a different weakness to lightning than the usual water, which was a good thing too. And I guess you could use this for a deck out strategy with the first attack as well. Discard fire energies and deck out your opponent's deck. Didn't do that, but it was there too. Cool card, but didn't see as much play as the other two birds. Now, Articuno, on the other hand, did have a crucial role in those Quagsire Wailord GX decks. Both the ability and its attack synergized with that deck well. With Blizzard Veil, as long as Articuno was in the active spot, it was going to negate any supporter effects on your bench water Pokemon. So that included the ever popular Guzma, that included other supporters like there was a chick that could discard energies too. And just any supporter effect, you were basically going to ignore that, negate it, your water Pokemon on the bench were safe. And as this guy was active with Cold Cyclone, you could do 70 damage, move the 2 water energies from this Pokemon to your bench Pokemon. So you could do a little bit of damage as you were setting up, and save the energies too, so you didn't even have to worry about losing energies when this guy got KO'd. Definitely synergized well with Quagsire, and it was a pretty common card in those decks. Of course, when that deck faded out, it didn't really see any other key play in any other water deck, I guess. I can't really think of anything you could use it for support, but it never really got that big of a rollback like in that deck. And then for the last bird and the most competitive one, Zapdos. Why is it that Zapdos is always the better of the other two birds? Like it's the case in the games and in the TCG. We're going to get another new Galarian Zapdos card that's also probably better than the other two. But anyway, this card did have a big impact when it came out with Thunderous Assault. It kind of escaped me. I didn't think people would use it in a deck with Jirachi. But that strategy basically became the small Pokemon killer, essentially. Whether you were using Stage 1 or Stage 2 GXs or just regular Stage 2 or Stage 1 Pokemon, if you had to use small Pokemon, Zapdos was easily going to pick on them since you used switches and escape ropes all day, kill the small Pokemon before they had the chance to evolve, and it was also used in the Pikarom decks as a regular lightning Pokemon tech. A lot of the Pikarom decks did have Jirachi as a big part of the engine and a bunch of switchy cards anyway, so you could easily use this card in that deck too, and you had that sort of a Zapdos option. If I remember right, back when I used to watch the Pokemon TCG streams, a person did actually win a whole the US national event against Stefan Ivanov using the Zapdos Jirachi deck. It did have other major tops either way. With bigger tag team GXs and VMAXs having larger HP, it pretty much couldn't compete like most regular Pokemon. Like even a Pokemon like this couldn't do it. And of course, Arceus' GX attack is the death of all regular Pokemon. That was the final blow. Pikarom and Lightning decks now don't use it. Maybe some of them do, but at least I don't see it, and it's gonna rotate now finally too. We got a Mulga next. This was a pretty cool Pokemon with a Nuzzly Gathering. You could gather Pokemon that have the Nuzzle attack. Alongside other Nuzzle Pokemon, you could gather Extreme Energy Acceleration with the Pachirisu from Ultra Prism, I think. Power up some Pokemon like Raichu, Raichu GX, and do stuff. But I mean, it wasn't anything special. I needed a lot of setup to work. But the cool thing about this ability is that you could just run this in other decks as a sort of engine. Like Emolga could grab itself since it also knows the Nuzzle attack. So you could just run like 4 Emolgas in a deck and use this card as a discard outlet. Lost March did this kind of well. They would use Emolga, grab the Emolgas, and then use the little Lost Blender card, fill the Lost Zone and draw cards, keep going. Another great use would be in decks that use the Roxy supporter. It was great fodder for that, helping you draw more cards, discard Pokemon. And I also personally used it quite a bit in my Gengar Mimikyu Vileplume deck in Expanded, in order to have enough basic Pokemon so that I don't mulligan all day long and give my opponent free cards. And then it would be used as an easy discard outlet for stuff like Ultra Ball and deck thinning, grabbing these cards and then using Juniper, that sort of thing. Had Free Retreat as well, making a good pivot. Just a very useful card for a lot of strategies thanks to that ability. Definitely could help you with a lot of combos. Also going away, we have Absol with Dark Ambition. I'm pretty sure they printed this here with Jirachi as a sort of answer to that card with Dark Ambition. The retreat cost for your opponent's active basic Pokemon was 1 more. So what it meant was Jirachi, if it had the skateboard on, it wasn't going to be able to retreat for free. And this card did see some play in various decks as a means to counter Jirachi. But it started seeing less and less play when people realized that Jirachi players use switches and escape ropes all day long anyway, and it wasn't going to be that complete counter to Jirachi, but it was still a really good ability. Just any basic active Pokemon's retreat cost was going to be 1 more, so any regular basic GXs, tag team GXs, you would annoy them as well, I guess, if they didn't have a switch. We got Milotic V, and I really wanted to use Milotic V with this guy. I mean, an obvious combo, boost the retreat of Pokemon and then do more damage, but never got enough Milotics. There was some other Pokemon I guess you could use, like a Tangrowth that did more damage the more retreat your opponent had. Its Shadow Seeker attack sort of synergizes with this ability too. It was a decent Pokemon. I guess you could use it in some decks for support. Then we got Yveltal. I'm only mentioning this card because Eternatus decks sort of use it because of the free retreat, and I guess Derail is a good attack. Outside of that, I don't really see this card being used in any other deck. I mean, with Eternatus, you need a lot of Darkness Pokemon. This was one of the better options, I guess. Free retreat, like I said, discard special energies with its attack, but it's also leaving now. Mr. Mime with Scoop Up a Block. This was also a decent little support card, I guess, in some decks. When we had a Sororola around, it was a really big card. Her and Guzma basically from Burning Shadows. And this guy was going to negate that basically. Pokemon with damage counters couldn't be put back in the hand, so you could use it to stop a Sororola plays. That's it. Nobody's using this card now, at least from what I see, and it too will leave. Then we got the Bronzor with Evolutionary Advantage. Bronzong decks are kind of making a comeback with the new Bronzong that moves metal energies around. I mean, you don't necessarily need this Bronzor, and if you don't go second, you lose the plus, then you're stuck with a 50 HP Bronzor when you can use like the 70 HP, 60 HP ones. But most people did use this card, and it's also going away. And then finally, to finish things off, we have the Fairy Mimikyu, just the fairy version of the Mimikyu from Guardians Rising, the psychic one. You can draw 2 cards with the first attack, and then Copycat, copy a non-GX attack, and this card was also seen some tech play here and there. My god, we are finally finished. I'm sorry this video took so long, guys, but I wanted to do things right. I don't know if I'm gonna keep using this sort of format. Maybe I'll just do things on Cerebi because it's gonna be faster, but once I started, I had to finish. But this is basically Team Up. It's one of the most important sets, if not the most important set that we're losing from this rotation. Maybe I guess Cosmic Eclipse is technically the biggest one since it has Arceus, the most dominant card for sure. But this set does have Jirachi, which is going to be a very huge card from this set in my opinion. A lot of other meta cards and decks are finally rotating out. Many cards here stopped seeing play for a while now either way. But nevertheless, I hope you guys enjoyed this first part of our rotation videos for this year. Subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Share this video with your friends. I gotta do the Chillin' Reigns and meta video that's already late because of this video. And I will get back to doing matches soon, so please bear with me. Saber Finder 4. What's say?